University of America. I really want to thank the American Bar Association and the German Federal Bar Association, our co-sponsors for this event. American Bar Association has lent us this remarkable exhibit that's out on the floor of our atrium. So I hope you get a chance to look at that. And the German Federal Bar has, among other things, co-sponsored our reception. So we really thank the support of these folks. We have a lot of distinguished guests. I think the president of the university is going to say hi to some of you. I'm going to move on to introducing him. Although I do want to say a brief word about why we're doing this, why we're here, and why today. And I'm a relatively new dean. I started in just this last July. When I came into the law school, or actually before I came in, I met with faculty members individually and to get some advice. And one of the things that happened, among many good things, was that I met with Professor Cliff Fishman, who's in the audience here today. Professor Fishman taught criminal law-related topics here for many years and spoke very movingly to me about being a Jewish faculty member at a Catholic law school his entire career, and what it's really meant to him with the last three popes, saying what they said and doing what they did with respect to the Holocaust and visiting Auschwitz and so forth. And so that was the inspiration. Thank you, Professor Fishman. He retired at the end of this last calendar year, and so this is in part to honor you, sir. Thank you very much. And look, as we get further and further away from these events that we're here to talk about today, I just think that we can't be blasé, we can't be lukewarm about. I'm very interested in the school's Catholic mission and identity, and coming in here and talking about that, and meeting with people like Professor Fishman, who help students lead seders and things like that as well. And so, what does our Catholic mission mean? And I just think that we can't be lukewarm about loving other people who are made in the image of God as our neighbors, and I don't think we can be lukewarm about calling evil by its name. And so I would urge all of us to make ourselves contemporaneous with this pivotal moment in human history. And that may sound a bit mystical since we can't go back in time, but what I mean is, we have events such as this, where as we go from generation to generation, we remember and we get as close to it as we can so that we don't forget and so that we draw the proper lessons from it. So that's why we're here, that's why we're doing it. It dawned on me that 2020 was the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camps, and at the end of World War II, and the start of the Nuremberg trials. And this, of course, we are a law school, and our event has a legal theme. And the ABA, as I said, was kind enough to lend us their exhibit, which is called Lawyers Without Rights. And this is the opening event for that exhibit. We expect to do a judges conference and an academic conference in the fall, so we hope some of you may participate in that as well. But let me introduce John Garvey. He's the 15th president of the Catholic University of America, and he became our president on July 1st, 2010. He's a nationally acclaimed expert in constitutional law, religious liberty, and the First Amendment. He's authored and co-authored numerous books and articles, too numerous to mention, but two include What Are Freedoms For? And Religion in the Constitution. He received his A.B. summa cum laude from the University of Notre Dame in 1970. He graduated from Harvard Law School in 1974. He clerked for Irving R. Kaufman, the chief judge of the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, later joined the law firm of Morrison & Forster in San Francisco, began teaching law at the University of Kentucky in 1976, and held that appointment until 1994. From 1981 to 1984, he served as assistant to the Solicitor General of the United States, arguing many prominent cases in front of the United States Supreme Court. He taught law at the University of Notre Dame from 1994 until 1999, when he was appointed Dean of the Boston College Law School. I can tell you it is very helpful to have a president of the university who knows what it's like to be a law school dean. He is regularly, too many things to mention, but he's regularly testified before the United States House of Representatives, including on issues related to religious liberty and anti-Semitism. And And so with that, I will turn it over to President John Garvey.
Thanks very much. It's always nice to be over here at the law school where I am a member of the faculty, although I've never contributed anything other than an occasional speech here. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me begin by welcoming Wojtin, who was the Deputy Chief of Mission for the German Embassy, and also Ulrich Wessels, who's the President of the German Federal Bar, and Stephen Goodman, who's the Bar's Executive Director, and Holger Scherf, who's the Legal Counsel from the German Embassy. Representing our own legal system, the Honorable Mary Horn from U.S. Court of Federal Claims, and Robert Destro, the Assistant Secretary of State for Democracy, Human Rights, and Labor, and Judy Perry Martinez, who's the President of the American Bar Association, and who's joined us today. I want to thank Bill Joyke from the ABA for his help in bringing the exhibit to us, and from our own university, Murry Sidlin from our music school, and Drs. Amanda Sheffer and Katrina Rudolph, who are here from the university's German Studies program and brought their students with them. Welcome to them. This anniversary is not a celebration, but it's an occasion for remembering the liberation of the Nazi death camps 75 years ago. The first of those camps, Dachau, was opened in 1933. And that same year, the German government enacted two laws. One, the law on the restoration of the professional civil service, and the other, the law on the admission to the bar. The first of these required Jewish judges to retire. The second allowed for the disbarment of Jewish lawyers. There were some exceptions for people who would join the bar before 1914, and for veterans of the First World War. But these two laws anticipated the Nuremberg laws of 1935 in discriminating against Jews as a matter of law. It also had a wider effect on the fortunes of the Nazi Party. Between the time of German unification in the 1870s and the Weimar Republic, the number and influence of Jewish lawyers grew to the point where, at the beginning of the Nazi regime, they represented about 25 to 30% of the profession in Germany. And this coincided with a much desired reform of the legal system into one that embodied new, for them, liberal principles of equality and individual rights and democratic participation. But the destruction of the judiciary and of the legal profession made possible the destruction of the legal system itself. In its place, the Nazis put what Ernst Fraenkel described as the dual state, a prerogative state, as he called it, characterized by arbitrary power and official violence, the brutality of the brown shirts, and a normative state in which newly enacted Nazi laws replaced the liberal democracy that had preceded it. This anniversary should be a reminder for us of two things. One is the importance of a strong and just legal system as a barrier against the worst impulses of human nature. When those walls come down, we're the prey of the wolves among us, and the life of man is, as Hobbes famously said, solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. The other is that the system of laws cannot subsist on its own. Its survival and functioning from one generation to the next depends on the men and women who were entrusted with its care. And it's no exaggeration to say that we, judges, lawyers, and people who make the laws, hold the fate of our countrymen in our hands. The Nazi Party understood this well. In its elimination of the rights of Jewish lawyers paved the way for the death camps, whose liberation we commemorate today. Thanks for having me over this. And thanks to the ABA for sharing its information.
Thank you very much, President Garvey, for those thoughts to orient us here. And now I'd like to introduce the president of the American Bar Association, Judy Perry Martinez. Judy Perry Martinez is of counsel and former partner and member of the management committee at her law firm in New Orleans, Simon, Harrigan, Smith and Redfern. She, as I said, is the president of the American Bar Association, which is the largest association, voluntary association of attorneys and legal professionals in the world. Over the past 35 years, she's held various leadership positions with the ABA, including chair of the Standing Committee on the Federal Judiciary, which is the committee that evaluates all nominees for the federal bench. And earlier, she served as the ABA's lead representative to the United Nations, as a member of the ABA Board of Governors and as part of its executive committee. She's also served on numerous ABA committees dealing with critical issues in law and society. She served as the chair of the ABA's Presidential Commission on the Future of Legal Services and its Commission on Domestic Violence. She was a member of the ABA Commission on Women in the Profession, the ABA Task Force on Building Public Trust in the American Justice System, and the Council of the ABA Center on Diversity. Between 2003 and 2015, she was at Northrop Grumman Corporation, serving as the Assistant General Counsel for Litigation, and then as Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer. She's held several positions within the New Orleans and Louisiana State Bar Associations, and has served on the board of the Innocence Project in New Orleans, Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, as well as an officer of the World Justice Project. She's also served as a Distinguished Access to Justice Pro Bono Fellow for Southeast Louisiana Legal Services. She earned her bachelor's degree from the University of New Orleans and her JD with honors from Tulane Law School. And so I really appreciate her support and I'm happy to welcome Judy Perry Martinez.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you, Dean Kane, for those kind words and the kind introduction. And let me also thank President Garvey. It's an honor to be with you today and to have you host the Lawyers Without Rights exhibit, and for arranging this most impressive program for all of us here today. And thank you to our honored guest. We are most happy to have you with us, and our friends from across the way who have traveled far on their way, by the way, to the American Bar Association mid-year meeting. Since 2012, the ABA has had a remarkable partnership with the German Federal Bar and joint sponsorship of a traveling exhibit on the fate of Jewish lawyers in Germany during the Third Reich. Today, I am most pleased to recognize two friends of the ABA who have traveled here from Germany, Federal Bar President Ulrich Wessels and Executive Director Stefan Gokin. Thank you both. This is their exhibit. This is an exhibit about which we can all be very, very proud. And to have an opportunity to be the North American stewards of this exhibit, of this vision from the German bar, is quite the privilege. Uli and Stefan, please stand so that we all can thank you in person here today. The origins of the Lawyers Without Rights exhibit goes back to 1988, when an Israeli lawyer asked the regional bar of Berlin for a list of Jewish lawyers whose law licenses had been revoked by the Nazis. While we know much about the Holocaust, until this exhibit was put together, few people knew the details of the Third Reich's attacks on German lawyers and how those attacks paved the way for history's most monstrous outrage against humanity. This exhibit vividly and sadly in some ways reminds us that the great tragedy that can follow lawyers when they are, as a part of an essential part of the judicial system, doing their work, and how the just rule of law is undermined if those attacks against them are allowed to flourish. That's what happened in Germany starting nearly 90 years ago. This appearance at the Columbus School of Law represents the exhibit's first to a law school affiliated with a Catholic university or venue. The exhibit has been displayed at federal and state courts, including the Supreme Court building in my home state of Louisiana in 2017, public libraries, temples, synagogues, and community centers. A year ago, we published an English translation of a book on the fate of Jewish lawyers in Berlin. We have copies for sale outside of the room here. And through this book and the exhibit, the Lawyers Without Rights Project provides a chilling reminder of why we must all stand united behind the rule of law. Our presence here today, each and every one of you, should be a reminder to all of us that the rule of law is fragile. It takes commitment and work to maintain. When the rule of law is under attack, silence is not an option. Many of us here today are lawyers or aspiring ones. As lawyers, we share a commitment to due process, equality, judicial independence, and a fair and impartial judiciary, no matter where we're from, no matter what area of the law we work in, and no matter what our politics may be. The ABA's partnership with the German Federal Bar underscores that our commitment to the rule of law transcends all boundaries. Under Nazi rule, Jewish lawyers in Germany were among the first professionals to be persecuted, and many had to flee the country from tyranny. Jewish lawyers faced humiliation and degradation, and ultimately all but a few were driven from the legal profession. As Ben Ferencz, the sole surviving Nuremberg prosecutor, wrote in his foreword to Lawyers Without Rights, their suffering has not been forgotten, nor has it been in vain. We will never forget. I know joining us today are several descendants of these lawyers, first and second and third generation Americans whose ancestors were fortunate to survive the Nazi terror. Some are lawyers themselves. Lawyers like Judge Marion Blankhorn, who you will hear from today. The stories of these descendants provide a very personal reminder of how the Nazis undermined the rule of law, replacing it with rule by law. Why lawyers must not remain silent when we see injustice, even against one, should be profoundly obvious to each and every one of us. Why we must challenge unjust laws and policies that undermine the just rule of law, even if we and others before us have allowed them to persist, because that is how it is and has been for years in the past. Part of the reason this exhibit is so powerful is that it demonstrates that lawyers and judges serve on the front lines of defending democratic governance. When lawyers and judges come under attack, it is a warning that the democratic system of checks and balances is under attack. Unfortunately, this trend has continued long past the end of the Third Reich. For nearly a decade, the American Bar Association's Center for Human Rights has coordinated pro bono legal support, monitored trials, and engaged in advocacy on behalf of more than 650 advocates in every region of the world who have faced retaliation for their human rights work. Roughly a third of those persecuted advocates have been lawyers, judges, prosecutors, and other legal professionals who fight corruption, defend the rule of law, and represent the most vulnerable in their communities. Thank you again for joining us today, and on behalf of the American Bar Association and all those many lawyers within our nation and beyond who do our work, we thank the Columbus School of Law, Catholic University of America, for hosting this wonderful event in today's program. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy, and thank you for that reminder about the rule of law. And again, we really appreciate the ABA's and the German Bar Association's support of this event. And now we have a special interlude, if you will. I would like to introduce Professor Murry Sidlin, who is a doctor and faculty member here at the Roman School of Music, Drama, and Art at the Catholic University of America. And he's the president and creative director of the Defiant Requiem Foundation, an organization that sponsors live concert performances of Defiant Requiem, Verdi and Terezin and Hours of Freedom, the story of the Terezin composer, as well as other projects, including the documentary film Defiant Requiem, docudrama called Mass Appeal 1943, the Raphael Schechter Institute for Arts and Humanities in Terezin, and a comprehensive web-based educational curriculum with additional resources for educators. In addition, he lectures extensively on the arts and humanities as practiced by the prisoners in the Third Reich Terezin concentration camp. He's been a conductor and music director of many symphony orchestras around the country and a guest conductor at many around the world. He served as the Dean of the School of Music at Columbus University, at the Catholic University of America. He's particularly well known and recognized for his focus on the music and composers of the Holocaust. And, for example, he presented the first performances of Divine Requiem in Portland, Oregon, and since then has done nearly 50 performances. On 3 occasions, he's led performances in the Czech town of Terezin, the site of the concentration camp. And in June 2009, that performance served as the conclusion to the multinational Holocaust Era Assets Conference, attended by nearly 600 delegates from 47 nations, and hosted by the Czech government and the Forum 2000 Foundation. He's also done it in Jerusalem. He's received many important commendations and awards for this work, including in September 2011 when the Archbishop of Prague presented him with the Medal of St. Agnes of Bohemia for his dedication to illuminating the legacy of Terezin. January 2013, he was nominated to the International Board of Governors of the Jerusalem Academy of Music and Dance. And finally, in June of 2013, he received the Simon Wiesenthal Center's Medal of Valor for his extraordinary efforts to keep alive the memory of Raphael Schechter. I was just thrilled to discover that Murry was right here at the Catholic University of America, and I'm so glad to welcome him to this performance. You know, we are a Catholic school, and the truth is an integrated whole, and so we're glad to have Murry here and have his wonderful performers to remind us of the music of the Holocaust. So, Murry Sidlin.
Thank you, President Garvey, Dean Payne, honored guests, university administration, faculty. How perfect that this exhibition comes to us at the precise moment when in many locations and among many peoples, we are witnessing an enormous variety of commemoration events pertaining to this, the 75th year after the liberation of towns, nations, and especially the unspeakable death camps and prisons where many millions of humans suffered and were mostly murdered. We commemorate the end of those 12 years of insanity and chaos. And at that moment of liberation, the eyewitnesses came forward and we learned about the significant role that the arts and humanities played in several prisons, offering the prisoners some measure of nutrition, dignity, and inspiration, thereby responding to the worst of mankind with the best of mankind. For example, in the ghetto concentration camp of Terezin, which was re-identified by the Nazis as Theresienstadt, there were approximately 2,400 lectures given by 530 prisoners, 30 lectures alone by Dr. Heinrich Klong on all facets of law, and over 300 lectures on literature. Over 1,000 concerts, including complete operas, performances of Tosca, Magic Flute, the Playhouse, 35 performances of the Bardic Bride, chamber music, cabaret, a jazz band known as the Ghetto Swingers, and most importantly, a new music studio comprised of about 20 prisoner composers who were at work bringing forth new music, contemporary music of hope, longing, music that was heartbreaking, music that was clearly serving as eyewitness, music that carried messages, music of plain entertainment, in memoriam, and some music too dangerous to perform, therefore censored by a council of Jewish elders. New music, new art, new creativity translates as faith in the future. All this with little or no nutrition in the diet, and work days and weeks that were brutal, actual slave labor. That council of elders, when needed, also served as a court This was not the court in Terezin of some of the most prestigious lawyers from the courts of Vienna, Berlin, and Amsterdam, which heard accusation offenses of desperation. This council was diversely comprised of some lawyers, well-known rabbis such as Rabbi Leo Beck, chief rabbi of Berlin before he was arrested, and scholars, educators, physicians, and psychologists. The most critical case which they themselves brought to their own counsel concerned the famed oratorio by Italian opera composer Giuseppe Verdi, his Requiem Mass. The council wanted to ban all planned performances of this work, claiming it would be perceived as a Christian service parading as a concert. And when the performing intent of the Requiem Mass was discovered, major protests by Orthodox Jews erupted. The volunteer choir numbered 150, and rehearsals had begun, and there was only one score in the entire camp. The complete composition was taught and learned by rote, taught in Latin by a young girl who was 16, member of the choir, who was born Jewish but had converted to Catholicism, and she knew the Mass very well. The conductor, Raphael Schechter, responded to the council by refusing to accept their Verdi verdict, stating that the meaning of any great work of art is never limited to its original intent. He asked, are only Christians allowed to be deeply moved by Michelangelo's Pietà? Are only Christians allowed to cry at Bach's St. Matthew Passion? The council relented, and 16 performances of Verdi's Requiem were presented. Now I would like to offer you a sample of the minds and hearts of Terezin creativity. I have with me today two colleagues of the School of Music, Drama, and Art who will present two songs composed at Terezin. The first comes under the heading of Music of the Broken Heart, composed by Carlo Talba. Evidently, this short song is all that remains of the generous collection of music he composed while in prison. He was murdered in Auschwitz in 1944. The title is A Jewish Child. You are a child, like many in the whole world, yet you are a different child. You are a child who has lost his country. You are a stranger to all cities. How long you have not heard your language. Your heart is uninhibited. Home, Heimat, he cries for home. The second song will be sung, and it is a work of Victor Ullmann, the most famous composer in Terezin, and this is a song of hope. If ever I could make a beautiful creation, with text by Ricarda Cook. I'm happy to present to you now my two distinguished colleagues, Professor of Voice and Opera Sharon Christman, and Professor of Piano Ivo Kalchev, who will perform A Jewish Child by Carlo Talba, and If Ever I Could Make a Beautiful Creation by Victor Ullmann. Thank you very much.
Du bist ein Kind, wie all die vielen, die auf der ganzen Erde sind, wie all die anderen Geschwister.
Wow, thank you for that wonderful performance. There's nothing more transportable than, nothing brings it home so immediately as the music of the time and the hearts and minds of the people who went through it. Tough to transition from that, but thank you so much. I would like to introduce our honored guest, Mr. Rick Boitine, who took over the position of Deputy Chief of Mission at the German Embassy in Washington, D.C. in July 2019. Prior to that, he was visiting fellow in the Europe program at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. Before coming to the United States in 2018, he served as Chief of Staff to German Federal Foreign Minister Sigmar Gabriel. Between 2011 and 2017, he was Chief of Staff to several state secretaries of the German Federal Foreign Office. From 2015 to 2016, he headed the Division for the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, and served as Deputy Head of the Task Force for the German OSCE Chairmanship in 2016. Previously, he served in the German Foreign Office in several positions, including Head of the Division for Parliamentary and Cabinet Affairs and Deputy Spokesman of the German Permanent Representation to the EU. Between 2005 and 2007, Mr. Boitine was seconded to the EU Commission's Policy Planning Division, Bureau of European Policy Advisors, as a foreign policy analyst. He holds an MA in International Affairs from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, and a degree in law from the University of Bonn in Germany. Thank you very much for coming. Please welcome Mr. Boitine.
Dean Payne, thank you very much for these kind words of introduction. President Garvey, Judge Horn, Assistant Secretary Destro, Professor Sidlin, President Martinez, President Wessels, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, and especially students. I'm honored and I'm humbled to have been invited today on this occasion to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the liberation of the Nazi death camps. One of them, of course, and this is a holiday and a day of commemoration in Germany these days, January 27th, the liberation of the death camps in Auschwitz-Birkenau. Every one of you is aware of that. The name Auschwitz-Birkenau stands for the murder of at least 1.1 million people, most of them Jews. And as such, it has become a symbol of all the abhorrent crimes against humanity that the Nazi regime, that Germans perpetrated all over Europe. For all of that, German responsibility does not expire. These were the words of the German president, Steinmeier, just a few weeks ago at Yad Vashem. And he stressed that the words "never again" also entail that, and I quote him, "there cannot be an end to remembrance." Of course, I couldn't agree more, and I think I'm pretty certain that all of you feel the same way. But how do we ensure that? How do we make sure that there is no end to remembrance? Because when we look at our societies today, when we look at political discussion, if we look at social media, I think we should be under no illusion that it is not enough to just have the pictures of Auschwitz stuck in our minds. It is not enough that to trust that time has no power over these memories. As said the Russian soldier, Alexander Vorontsov, when he came to the camp in Auschwitz and filmed these, and some of the images that we have in our mind are actually from his film. So if the pictures are not enough, what can we do to ensure that our societies are vigilant enough to prevent, in Germany or any other place, frankly, around the world, that we spiral into dictatorship, into war, into a moral abyss that we saw in Nazi Germany, and into something as horrific as the Holocaust? Well, if you allow, I would like to again quote President Steinmeier from the other speech that he held 2 weeks ago on for the commemoration of January 27th, when he said, "We will find new forms of remembrance for a young generation, a generation that asks, well, what does history have to do with me and with my life today?" And he gave sort of a recipe saying that we need to retrace the long paths that led to the gates of Auschwitz. And I think when we open this exhibition here today, Lawyers Without Rights, Jewish lawyers in Germany under the Third Reich, we are doing just that. We are retracing some of the very early steps that the Nazi regime took to undermine the rule of law, to segregate society, to single out Jews, and ultimately to condemn them to annihilation. Because we all have to remember that these were very early steps. Hitler came to power at the end of January in 1933. The decree by the Prussian Justice Commissioner Hans Kern that refused Jewish judges, prosecutors, and lawyers access to Prussian courts effective April 1st of 1933 was, well, published only 2 months later after Hitler came to power. And then subsequently, German lawyers who happened to be Jewish were all barred from their profession. So in hindsight, I think we have to say that these early steps to pervert the rule of law through legal means, through laws, decrees, administrative decisions, they belong to the first steps leading towards Auschwitz. And the exhibit that you have the chance to look at outside shows us details of lives and fates of individuals, distinguished lawyers, Jewish faith, men and women alike. But at the same time, it also documents the injustice done to the rule of law, the injustice done to human dignity overall. That, in fact, was a stepping stone towards the catastrophe of the Holocaust. And I have to say, as a representative of Germany and as a lawyer, it pains me beyond words how little the rule of law counted and how the law effectively was used in my country to enable the most heinous crimes and unspeakable atrocities. And how much we lost in intelligence contributions to society in every field, culture being one of them, and we were just witness to that. This exhibition does not come to Washington, D.C. for the first time, but sadly, its message has not gone out of date, quite the contrary. With anti-Semitism on the rise in my country, but also in many other places around the world, the exhibition is as timely in 2020 as it was when it was first curated in Germany more than 20 years ago. And it is as timely as it was in 2012 when I think it came to DC for the first time. So I want to thank those who've made the exhibition possible once again here in DC, the American Bar Association, the German Federal Law, and of course the Catholic University. And thank you all, presidents of these institutions and all your collaborators for making this possible. I would like, of course, after the contribution by Judge Horn about a family that was actually touched by what the Nazis did, I want us to open this exhibition as a commemoration of the liberation of the death camps, and at the same time have us understand it as testimony to our efforts to educate, to stand up against anti-Semitism, stand up against extremism, political extremism, and to protect our democracies, protect rule of law. Because, and President Garvey said this, and you, President Martinez, hinted at it as well, it is up to the people to take care of it, take care of democracy and rule of law. So thank you very much for being here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boykin, for your remarks and for your support of this event. Last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce you to the Honorable Marion Blankhorn, who was appointed by the President and confirmed by the United States Senate as a judge of the United States Court of Federal Claims in 1986 and again in 2003. She's a graduate of Barnard College, Columbia University, and received her law degree from the Fordham University School of Law. Before being appointed to the United States Court of Federal Claims, Judge Horn served as acting solicitor and principal deputy solicitor at the United States Department of the Interior, and as associate solicitor for general law and deputy associate solicitor for surface mining, also at Interior. She formerly served as deputy assistant general counsel for procurement and financial incentives, senior attorney for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, and litigation attorney at the Department of Energy. Judge Horn is an adjunct professor at the George Washington University Law School. She's also taught as an adjunct professor of law at the Washington College of Law at American University, and will be receiving an invitation to teach here forthwith, because that's clearly missing from her. Her previous experience includes private law practice and service as a prosecutor and deputy chief of the Appeals Bureau in the District Attorney's Office for Bronx County, New York. Judge Horn's father, Werner Blank, as you'll hear, was a German judge in Berlin when he was removed from the bench by the Nazis for being Jewish. So we really welcome you, Judge Blankhorn. Please give her
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Dean, and thank you to the president of the university, the head of my ABA, and the representatives from the German embassy and the German bar. This is very personal, obviously, and I'll try to do this without cracking my voice. I married two of my daughters, and they were taking bets as to how long it would take for my voice to crack. The third one said she couldn't tolerate waiting for that, so she had one of my colleagues do it. But it is a personal thing, and I'm here really to talk about something that's terribly important. I am an academic in my own way. I have always taught pretty much from the beginning of my career, although as an adjunct with daytime duties. And I love to talk, and I'm delighted that there's so many students here, frankly. It's important. I do have a history degree, so it is also important to me, and did a thesis on historiography. So learning from history is something that I think is terribly, terribly important. I'm here to honor my father and mother, my grandmother, and those are the three that made it to this country. Some of the others did not. They escaped from the Holocaust, arrived in this country with a very few financial resources, few acquaintances, and horrible past experience, which continued, frankly, as they continued to receive news from Europe, or worse still, no news at all. No news at all about friends and relatives, and obviously anxiety, little money, and starting out a whole new way of life. I'm on the Court of Federal Claims at this point, the United States Court of Federal Claims, which for those of you that don't know the court, because we don't try to hide, but we are not like a district court. We are a trial court, but we deal with claims against the United States, claims against the sovereign. That's a unique concept in many countries around the world. It's not one that's recognized in many countries around the world where you can't sue the sovereign. And so we deal with government contracts, tax, patents, Fifth Amendment taking claims, Native American claims, variety of other things. Most of our cases are pretty large dollar volume and pretty complex. We get a few of the simple ones, but frankly, because of the way the jurisdictional setup is statutorily enacted, there are other places to go for the lower dollar volumes and a lot of the more pro se cases that tend to be shorter in duration. It's a court that I love. I actually love my job. I'm very lucky. I've been on the court for over 30 years. I have been fortunate to get 2 presidential appointments to the court, maybe not so fortunate to do 2 Senate confirmations. Neither one of them was wonderful, although one was easier than the other. And the one that was not so easy was because I was the acting solicitor in the Department of Interior, and although they asked me no questions about myself, and I introduced my family and my 3 daughters who were in little pink dresses. They were young at the time. They then sent me 70 pages of questions asking about environmental policy and energy policy related to the Department of Interior. Got through it, but it is quite a process, as all of you have watched recently in the news. I had always wanted to be a prosecutor when I went through law school. And one of the things I would say to all the law students here is, don't close your mind, because serendipity will take over your career. I've had opportunities and wonderful, wonderful mentors, one of whom actually was a death camp liberator. He was the Solicitor of Interior. He's the one who handed my job, which was both to be the Deputy Solicitor and the Acting Solicitor. And he kept a copy of his death camp photos in his desk. And he pulled them out periodically just for people that he was comfortable with, and said this should keep us all humble, and this should all remind us of the role of law. And that's a lesson I've taken with me all of the rest of my career. He was formerly a Supreme Court judge on the State of California Court, and he took the rule of law very, very seriously, and obviously we've heard today a lot of reasons why that is something we should be doing. I've had a lot of opportunities, one of which has been to be very involved in the establishment of the Holocaust Museum here in Washington. You're at the right place at the right time sometimes. I was the acting solicitor. I was also the deputy solicitor at the same time when the museum really ran into some problems after the statutory enactment to have it established. We had to be sure we had enough money because there was a requirement to raise a certain amount of money for the matching money that was coming from the government. And we had obviously a lot of counter tensions. There were a lot of refugees and escapees actually on the board of the museum at the beginning. Many of them were major builders here in Washington, D.C., who were very committed to making this museum happen. And so my ability to contribute to that, to sign some of the early documents, to do the land transfer from the government to the museum, to make sure that there was some executive management as they grew into a real museum on the ground with open doors, was an opportunity that I cannot even underestimate at all. When I left to go to the court, we do have this thing called separation of powers. I had to extricate myself out of the museum to some extent, other than to be a supporter and a real advocate for the museum. But my husband joined the board of the Holocaust Museum, which he was on for 12 years through varying administrations of both political parties. And he was on the executive committee and on the content committee when the museum began to assemble its exhibit. So he too comes from a refugee family, although not from Berlin. My father was a Berliner through and through. My mother was born in Munich, but at age 1 moved to Berlin, and they spent a few years together in Berlin after they got married. My husband's family came more from the Hanover region, and so it was kind of logical when the Secretary of Interior said, well, how can we reward you for what has been 2 jobs all at the same time? And, I was okay with it, how you did it. I said, consider my husband for the museum board. He's a very political individual, so he could get through the White House for that appointment. And so the family, both sides of the family have contributed a great deal, I think, to making the history of what happened in Europe at the time, and it wasn't only Germany, known to everybody around the world and keeping that story alive. I stand here as a symbol, really, of opportunity, optimism that this country has to offer. We have been very, very fortunate. I'll never shake that optimism, regardless of strife and division that permeates in the world today. I'm first-generation American, and that comes with some interesting burdens. I'm the second judge in the family, but I am the first-generation American. My father, Werner P. the P was acquired somehow upon immigration here. It was not given to him when he was born. And there's a lot of stories, mostly before he came, where people would acquire completely new names on Ellis Island. He was after Ellis Island, but people were given new names if they were too complicated. His name wasn't that complicated. Blank is relatively easy, although it's pronounced as Blank. He was an appellate court judge, Landgerichtsrat in Germany, in Berlin, and he was unceremoniously demoted, disbarred. In an odd way, that turned out to be a favor of sorts to my father and mother. It was an early warning system that they needed to consider leaving. And I wouldn't be here but for the fact that they understood that they needed to leave. My one grandmother was of a generation that sadly thought that older people wouldn't be bothered by the Nazis. She made it out in 1939 through a series, very late obviously, through a series of events, and how we come full circle whenever we talk, through an artists and musicians transport. One of the exchanges of oil for artists that was occurring at the time. Fortunately, it was done by the son of one of her best friends, and along with the artists and musicians, although she was a recognized musician as well, pianist, he put them on the transport along with the rest of them. So his mother and my grandmother got out. Sadly, he went back for the transfer of the oil and he did not get out. But my grandmother came in 1939 at the point that my uncle became a citizen. He had to leave Germany earlier because he had a non-Jewish girlfriend, and those were people who were targeted fairly early in the Nazi experience. At home, I have a lot of documents actually, that my father, who was very German, very German, very organized. He came to dinner in a jacket and tie until he was in his 80s. And I grew up in a very German household. I speak German, I can read German. I don't write it very well. That's the one thing, because it was learned in a social way. But he organized his files, and so when he passed away, I inherited passports, the Holland America line ship on which they came to this country, various other things that are not so nice to look at. And I haven't really cataloged them in any way, but as I prepared for this talk, I kind of went through them and took a look at them again. In that file also is a copy of both of my parents' citizenship papers, something they treasured incredibly proudly. Once my parents arrived in this country after some difficult visa issues, and that was at the American end, not so much the German end. As you may know, if those of you who have gone to the Holocaust Museum, there wasn't a rounding welcome for everybody either on this end. So they had some visa issues. They overcame those. And once they got here, they impressed on me the need to stay aware of current events, to participate in the electoral process, and to contribute back to this country as a responsibility resulting from the gift of citizenship. I'm always concerned with my own kids too. I have 3 daughters, 7 grandchildren, and the grandchildren are 12 and under, so it's a little hard to get that message across, except to the oldest one so far. But I often wonder, how you instill that same sense of responsibility in those who are not first generation. First generation Americans, I think, of all persuasions from all countries, have a little bit different attitude, because the gift of citizenship is very real to us. And how do we make sure that every generation actually thinks about voting, thinks about the process, doing it within the rule of law? After my father was disbarred, my parents began to look around as to where to go. They looked first to Holland. That wouldn't have been a good idea. They looked next to Spain, and under Franco, that would not have been a great idea either. And fortunately, there weren't any good jobs for my father in either of those 2 places, so they kept pounding away at trying to get an American visa. When they got here, the adjustment was enormous. They were lucky. They got here to the United States. Many of their close relatives and friends did not. There are a number of books on children of the Holocaust. People like me, first generation, maybe even second. And I always thought I was sort of unique, just a little different from some of my high school friends. But it turns out I'm really very much a product of that book. I'm just like them. You have that sense of responsibility. I'm not unique. After the realization that Germany would be a problematic place for my father, he really tried to figure out, how do I reconfigure myself? Sadly, of course, without the economic resources, he did not make the right choice.